Well, a good evening to you and welcome to the Trip to the Moon podcast on our now annual live transfer deadline day show. And it's a show that we're hoping will bring some reaction to a potential sign at 7 o'clock to discuss the news or lack of so far and to have a look at the window in general. Tom Boyes joins and so does Rob Pattinson. Great to have both of you on, guys. Tom, if we start with yourself, look, there are rumours that Joe, but how would you reflect on Tranmere's window on a whole?
I think it's been really positive, hasn't it, for a change? I think it's clear that the managers had more, clout and input into the signings. I think he's recruited to a very clear system, which we haven't seen previously. I think if you start from the back, we obviously had a very good goalie. Retaining Luke McGee was obviously really positive. And then in front of that, I think we've definitely strengthened those defensive options. I think Patrick Brough has certainly been one I've been really impressed with so far. Nathan Smith as well, like two very, very good signings in that area that I think were improving on what went before. And competition for places as well. You look, Jordan Turnbull's not been in the squad last couple of games, and I think he's still a very solid centre half at this level. So in that area, the pitch is good. Midfield, we've obviously freshened up. Smallwood, Kenner, Charlie Whittaker ahead of them. I think a really exciting player. And if we get Joe Ironside over the line, I think that's a big improvement on what we've got up front as well. It's obviously not the biggest squad. I think I don't know what the numbers are out versus in. I think it's quite a difference. I think that's probably by design, get a bit more quality in, and also players who can play different positions. I think there's a lot more flexibility within that squad. You've already seen like Brough can play centre half or left wing back. The young boy Joseph from Leicester looks like he can play right or left very comfortably. So I think it's a good, exciting squad.
Yeah, I'd agree with that, Tom. I think we've bemoaned over recent years, haven't we, that we've not really had a plan when it's come to signing players, and it's felt like a bit of a thrown together setup or signing who's available without really having an idea of how we're going to play them. I think it's only a couple of years ago now, but it feels a long time ago. But when we had Christian Dennis first join the club, along with Luke Norris, and we thought we've got two strikers there who've scored a lot of goals in the past and quite excited about it, only to find out we were actually setting up in a 4-3-3 that really kind of didn't get the best out of either of them, with Chris Dennis kind of forced into this slightly odd wide forward role, which he was patently unsuited to. I think we've gone into the closed season with a really settled style of play that had been instigated by Crosby. He seems a manager who has really impressed me with the work he does on the training pitch, the thinking he does behind team selection. And while I don't think he always gets it right, I think he's brilliant at being able to identify what's wrong in the starting lineup and tweak the system as needed. And it really feels like he's gone out there and recruited players that filled the gaps or fixed some of the issues we may have had with the squad he inherited last season. So I think particularly very un-Tranmere-like signings for me were Nathan Smith, a captain from a promoted club, the same again, a former captain from a promoted club, but someone that their fans held in really high esteem. Likewise, Smallwood, joining us as having been a captain at a promoted side. I think they're the sort of signings that feel like statement signs, feel like ambitious signings. And even if Smallwood's in an older age bracket, he's certainly a player who hasn't struggled for game time or had injuries or has any of those kind of alarm bells that you tend to get with a player of that caliber that we've maybe had in the past. I think if you look at the balance of the signings, the recruitment we've done, I think it's a good balance of experience and kind of youth and prospects. I think the glaring omission that we're still waiting on, we're still on tenterhooks to see if we solve today, was that up front, was that key central striker. And I think most Tranmere fans would probably say we need an actual starting number 9 still. And I think it's fair to say that getting to deadline day and still being in that position is something that leaves a lot of us quite nervous. But I think it actually puts a huge onus on getting that over line to maybe transform what our prospects could be this season. Because I think without that starting striker, and especially with Dennis being injured, you're relying on Josh Davison and perhaps Connor Jennings between them to deliver the sort of goals that could create a promotion chasing side. I think that's a lot to ask, to be honest. I think Davison has qualities, but I'd much rather see him be a player we can bring off the bench to bring those legs and to cause a problem for defences, or to feel less pressure to deliver, than perhaps to be our number 9 leading the line with all the pressure that comes. And you've seen some of the criticism in the last couple of games when maybe it hasn't been working for him as much as it did against, say, Shrewsbury. So generally, I'd say, as it stands, really strong recruitment, but I think missing that final piece of the puzzle, and as always is the case, that's almost the critical piece of the puzzle, is your main striker, isn't it? So especially the system like we're playing, with one focal point and then kind of several players that kind of come in and around that, from wing backs, from number 10 positions, etc. So yeah, a lot rests on this evening, should we say, in the next 23 minutes.
It does indeed. The window closing at 7 o'clock tonight, which is different to how it's been in the past. Previously, we've seen 11 p.m. and midnight deadlines, haven't we, to go with the rest of Europe and other countries further afield. There is a 7 o'clock deadline tonight, basically because office staff were working ridiculously long hours, and they're trying to make it easier for office staff, which I think is absolutely fair enough. If they were having to come in at like 7 a.m. and not leaving until 11 p.m. once the fax machine had word into action, it might actually be that Tranmere is still using a fax machine, and that's why we're still waiting at this hour of night instead of your regular emails or whatever. They haven't quite moved into the 21st century yet. It wouldn't surprise me. I remember when Tranmere signed Ryan Lowe going back now to 2013, he had to come into the offices at Radio City to have his contract faxed over to him, because it was the only place he knew that had a fax machine. So that's how it was 12 years ago. I don't know how it is now, but yeah, we are quite a long way past them. Anyway, as it stands, nothing has been done this deadline day. I am constantly checking. If you see me looking away from screen, it's because I'm checking the Twitter feeds of Tranmere, of Doncaster, with regards to Ironside as well. And an interesting message there from Paul Burrows, who I can share this on your screen, saying that Johnny Smith, the former Tranmere player, has made a move to Gillingham, having been at Wigan, and he was told that he could leave there. So 21 minutes to go until the deadline. Look, let's assume the worst first of all, and hope that something does happen. But if we're assuming the worst, Tom, how bad is it if they don't manage to get a deal over the line?
Oh, let's assume the worst. I get to rant now, don't I? I think it'd be chronic if we didn't. We've known for a very long time, haven't we, the shortcomings. I think we lost some decent attacking options last season. I think if obviously some of them were in you, like if you had a fit Luke Norris, Regan Hendry, Hawks, like, to not replace them with some quality would be a really poor window. I think so far we've sort of gambled. Dennis is another year older, Jennings is another year older. Obviously Dennis's calf has now given way. We don't know how serious that is. We've brought in Taylor Harris, who's an unknown. Hopefully he's this year's Rob Apter. Charlie Whittaker is similar. He's a little bit more experienced at this level, and a player I'm really excited by. But I think we're still light in that attacking area. And if you look at like teams who get promoted, and you look at how we got promoted from the National League and so forth, it's those attacking options, and I think it is options as well. It's not having one player that, I mean, I know Norwood did it that year, scored 30 goals, but if you can have a few different options in your toolbox to unlock defences and get yourself over the line in games, that's generally what works for teams. As of yet, we've not got that. We've looked a little bit one-dimensional from an attacking point of view, I would say, so far, and also very light on numbers. I touched on I know last season we had a lot of injuries, and that led to probably a very inflated squad number. But it is quite a small squad, certainly if you look at other teams in the league. I would have hoped, I think coming into today, I was expecting probably 3 bodies in, probably 1 marquee signing in inverted commas, and then 2 more who would be solid first team players. I think that would have been a really good solid deadline day. Again, we don't know what's going on behind the scenes. We don't know what budget we've got left. But I mean, hopefully Ironside is that marquee signing. I think if you do get him in, I think it benefits other players around him. I think you've seen firsthand, if you get a striker who can get hold of the ball, who can get on the end of crosses, that's going to help the likes of Whittaker, Taylor and Harris, obviously Amari, and the wing backs as well. If you haven't got that, if you've not got that striker being a nuisance, winning those headers, winning those balls into the box, it probably makes other players look not as good as they could be. So hopefully the reports do sound very promising. So hopefully that is the case. And I would hope that maybe there's another 1 or 2 in the pipeline somewhere. Obviously there's free transfers, which I think I'm correct in thinking that runs a bit over the deadline, doesn't it? So there is obviously options there, but I still think we could do with a couple more.
Rob's doing his best impression of Jim White there, and hasn't quite come to quite been listening to you, Tom.
Yeah, we're all waiting to be the one who can say, yeah, here we go. But I think I'd completely agree with that. I think what it does do if we don't get a striker over the line, or actually ideally I'd like a couple really still, but it puts much more pressure on the players who are here, you know, the ones who are doing the business. We've seen Amari Patrick be incredibly prolific so far, and there is an argument I think that you could slightly rejig things and actually just push Patrick up as your main outlet up top if you wanted to, although I think that would probably reduce the wonder goals from outside the area that he has the opportunity to score. But it puts the pressure more and more on those kind of players to keep delivering, and if form shifts and dries up, and we know that particular League Two players aren't consistent for particularly long periods, then suddenly you could end up in a rut like we were last season, where we couldn't buy a goal. And I think we do have some really interesting options in those kind of number 10 type roles. I've been impressed with a lot of what I've seen from Charlie Whittaker, even though he's green so far. I think there's a real player in there, and I think, you know, as the season progresses, we'll see more and more from him. I'm less convinced so far from Taylor and Harris, but again, with the caveat that it's very early days in his career at this level. I think we often see a player take a couple of months to adapt to, particularly, you know, men against boys type feeling with someone like him. So I definitely not writing them off yet, but a goal in that first home game doesn't necessarily mean we can expect 10, 12 goals from him this season, you know. And I think the loss of Christian Dennis is a big one. You saw the difference he made in the Gillingham game, and he came off the bench. First touch is to set up Patrick. He comes off the bench against Shrewsbury, and you saw the clinical nature of his finishing. I think what was actually a really difficult finish look really easy when he just casually, almost no look, finishes it into the net from Amari's cutback, and they have a real understanding. So it is a big loss. I think we can't necessarily say that the window shutting is the doom and gloom, though, but there is still the free transfer pool of players. We've seen that FPL list of out of contract players each week going through, and there's still names on there, you know, some of which we've been linked with, the likes of Callum Morton. I think even if we sign a player permanently, be it Ironside, be it somebody else or on loan before the window closes, I'd still like to see us potentially bring someone from that list in over the next few weeks. You know, I'm sure there have been conversations going on with some of those players. Maybe demands are too high. Maybe they're lower down our list of desirable players to bring in, but it might be that if we miss targets today, that we dip in there. So it's not impossible that we could still recruit beyond today. But I'd also potentially like to see another centre mid brought in into the mix. I know we've got Finlay to come back, but thought we saw maybe some of our limitations against County there to change things. Blacker maybe still a little bit green at the moment. Low, maybe not as dynamic as we'd potentially want him to be in that kind of role. And if Smallwood's having an off day, or Kenner, as we know, is going on international duty, it starts to look quite thin on the ground in that kind of position. But I think wing backs, we've got a lot of pace and options in those positions. Some really good options in defence. The only other kind of position I would say we're still short on is a third goalkeeper, really, because should anything happen to McGee, and we know he had an injury in pre-season, you rely on Joe Murphy, and I don't even know if we have another option. I don't know whether we can sign the goalkeeper coach that we've had knocking about for the last couple of years to cover, but it's usually you'd expect a kind of young keeper to be in the building as well to kind of be that option. So 2 to 3 more players through the door would be ideal. Certainly need at least one, I think. Otherwise, best aims for the season, I think just mid-table safety would be the aim. But if we can get an actual proven League Two goal scorer, front man, focal point for our attacks through the door, I think that there's every chance we could make that into that playoff push that we're all hoping we could do.
You can see the message there from Ant Hale, who says, disappointed no one has brought out the deadline day yellow tie for this chat, obviously made famous by Jim White. I remember we must be going back about 10 years now, and Sky put Jim White up for an interview ahead of deadline day to basically drum up a bit of extra interest in him. So I managed to have a chat with him for Radio City, and he was in a studio somewhere in London probably, and I was obviously in a studio in Liverpool and couldn't see him. All I could hear was what he was saying down the mic, and he did tell me on that interview that he was sitting there wearing nothing but a yellow tie. So there's some visuals for you to think about as we continue this chat. In terms of the window, and then look, there's still 12 minutes left to go, so it wouldn't be unlike Tranmere to announce something after the window closes, because as long as you've got the paperwork in, it can be ratified by the FA or the EFL. You mentioned the PFA players, so they put a tweet out today at 1:45. 46 free agents are joining us for the final week of PFA pre-season, and there are some big players on that list, as you mentioned. There are some very familiar names to us as well. Carl Jameson is on there. Connor Wood is on there. Ryan Watson as well. So a handful of former Tranmere players making up that list, and some players who've played at a much higher level than where Tranmere are now, such as Kazenga Lua's on there. Ravel Morrison is on there. Connor Wickham, I'm sure we remember him from what he's done. Mustafa Carriol's a good player. And there's other good players as well. Haki Badelican, I think, is a decent player. My understanding of the window, and people can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it is that it closes for a week, and then you can register those out-of-contract players. So Tranmere might sign an out-of-contract player, or they might be able to convince one to join them, but they wouldn't officially be able to join until after the Salford game this coming weekend anyway. So they would miss one game, basically, which is not the end of the world. But I think the thing we're all worried about, Tom, is that we saw on Saturday the limitations of this team with the current strikers that are available. You've already talked about it. There's no Christian Dennis at the moment. We know Harvey Saunders is gone, and I think we all agree that that's a good bit of business. Sam Taylor's obviously gone, so that there should be room in the squad with those two players having left. But it does leave you with, as an out-and-out centre forward, we only really think Josh Davison is that kind of player. Connor James can play there, but I think we all agree we'd rather see him elsewhere on the field, a little bit further back. And Taylor Harris can play there. But again, I mean, how many times have Tranmere brought young strikers in the past on loan, and they've actually made a mega impact in their stint at the club? I mean, yes, we can talk about Jake Cassidy, but for every Jake Cassidy, I'll give you a Shamir Fenlon, for example, who played under Mickey Adams in 2014-15, or a Ryan Brunt, who played under Les Parry in 2010, 2011, and I'm sure those of you listening could think of plenty more as well. So, yeah, you want it to be someone who, if someone's going to come in, it's got to be someone who's going to make a difference to that side. And if it is going to be Joe Ironside, then you would expect him to be that kind of person because he is more experienced and he's scored goals at a higher level. I would argue there's probably not much room in the squad at the moment now for another loanee, given that the three that are there. A young loanee, I should say.
Yeah, I think it depends on the style of the player, isn't it? You've seen like young loanies, and you get to see some of them are 6'4" and built like a bit like a brick shit house. There was one I think he actually might have been Joe Ironside's replacement at Doncaster, Rob Street. I think he was from Palace or somewhere, and he did a really good job for them. But
it was the one at Newport as well last year, wasn't there? Who was 2 metre tall? I can't remember his name off the top of my head.
Bambi, I think he's playing in some obscure place now, isn't he? Where I think the average height is about 5'4", so that'll be quite an interesting task for him. Kyle Hudlin, wasn't it? But I think what we need at that end of the pitch, we need a real proven League Two player. I think that's what we've lost. I think again, I know Norris had the injuries, and I'm not saying we should have offered him a deal, but if you had Luke Norris, Regan Henry, Hawks, you've got three players there who are proven Football League players. What we've replaced them with is risky ones that could be good or they could not be good. Harris is the obvious one on that. And then I'd say there's players like Sol Solomon as well, who I was a bit disappointed he was not even on the bench on Saturday. I think he's, of those attacking options, I still think his movements and his goal-scoring instinct is probably, after Christian Dennis, as good as we've got. He's not a physical player like Josh Davison. I wouldn't expect him to be leading the line as a one. But again, if you brought an Ironside in, I think he could be a player who could play off him quite well. I think Whittaker would bounce off him well. So it needs to be like the ready-made, no risk, good to go player. I agree with what Rob said as well about the midfield. I think we're lacking that slightly different player in that position. I think on Saturday, I think Smallwood and Kenner, they're great at winning the ball, great at plugging gaps. If you compared it to Ollie Norburn, who Notts County had, I don't think they're as good at getting on the ball and dictating the play and really being a bit more of a creative force and getting it into the final third. I think a player like that, which again you might get a younger player on loan who is better at that skill set. Maybe we're looking at that. So I wouldn't be against a loan in that position, but up front it needs to be ready made. And again, I think someone put at the very start, Johnny Smith. I think that would have been a very interesting option to explore, but given it was Gillingham, MK Dons in for him, I think we can safely assume the wages that they're paying versus what we could offer would be, I'd say, probably double. But I think that would have been a good attacking option as well. But yeah, Ironside's a key one. Again, hopefully he doesn't get injured after 5 minutes, which would be very Tranmere, or we're back to square one. But I think we've seen before, one really good attacking player can completely change how other players fit into the team. So hopefully he's that man. And hopefully he signs in the next 5 minutes, by the way.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because it's been obvious since, last season we knew we were short up front of good options. And since then we've let Luke Norris go, we've let Harvey go on loan. We haven't really brought, I don't personally kind of see Taylor Harris as that kind of what we class as like a striker option. He's kind of like a wide forward or a 10, but for the system that Crosby seems to want to play, that kind of, it's a bit like what was the Maypole analogy that Johnny King used to use. Used to have that kind of focal point for people to kind of dance around and play off. We've only really got Josh Davison who can do that job, and I do think he has a lot of qualities, but he's yet to prove that he can really be a goal scorer, and I think there's potentially some confidence issues there as well. And I don't think he's as natural, definitely not as natural a finisher as someone like Dennis. So yeah, I think Ironside would be brilliant, and it is really interesting to see that we're sort of hearing, from credible sources that it's potentially a permanent deal, which would be really interesting. And you wonder how long those conversations would have been going on if that is to be the case. How much is being kind of put on that actually coming off, and it would be quite typical of Tranmere, as you say, Matt. If we end the pod at 10 p.m., it's this was completed earlier, by the way, which don't get me wrong, I'd be happy with it if it does come off, but it's certainly a club that likes to keep us hanging right on till the very bitter end, isn't it? I don't know about the rest of you, but I've been seeing clubs at our level been doing business all day, and it's I think Shrewsbury put out a tweet saying, everybody loves getting a striker over the line or whatever when they signed someone a bit earlier, and it was I think a loanee from a young loanee player that had come in maybe from Peterborough. But it always feels like we're kind of watching everyone else do business and just hoping we get something over the line. And of course, in January, that was two United lads that really we knew had no intention of really playing, but it was just to kind of pacify the fan base, really. So let's hope that that's not to be the case today.
Yeah, I think it would be pretty disastrous if Tranmere were to sign two more players on loan who are 18 and barely out of youth football, and but clearly not going to have much of an impact on the team, as was the case with the two that arrived last year. We've got a message here from Duka, hope I pronounced that one right, saying that Kyle Hudlam now plays in Vietnam. He does indeed. I'm going to attempt the pronunciation of the name of the team that he plays for. Tep Zan Nam Din, I think is the name of the team, whose nickname is the Sacred Spirit of Dong A. There clearly has to be some business done fairly soon, if at all. Papa John here mentioning that Devante Cole has gone to Port Vale. I mean, obviously Tranmere weren't going to be able to prize someone like him down to League Two, but that looks like a good signing for them. I guess we're just playing that waiting game. It's been done before, hasn't it? I've definitely woken up in the morning after a deadline has passed and they've suddenly gone, oh yeah, we signed this player last night, didn't you know?
Yeah, I think they did that with Hawksy, I think, didn't they? But that was, I think the paperwork was borderline late for that one. And that obviously got announced late. I think that was the famous transfer window where we got Stephen Walker and someone else there. Stephen Walker's actually scoring a lot of goals in the team he's at now. I saw him, he scored 2 the other day against Southport, I think, maybe. But yeah, I think hopefully it's going to be a big, exciting announcement video. Hopefully it's not a case of actually we've got the paperwork up and we've not signed him. Then we would be in a pretty desperate position. Yeah, I don't know. I think if you're looking at the squad now, I think it's starting 11 is looking really solid. I think there's also a bit of scope to. I know Crosby's sort of sticking with the 3 at the back and the 2 number 10s quite rigidly, but I think certainly that front area of the pitch that could very easily become a 1, maybe a Charlie Whittaker behind Ironside and a Patrick, or an Ironside and a Sol Solomon. And I could also see us going to a bit of a 4-3-3 at certain points with Ironside as well. I think you've got a player who could lead the line and then have Patrick, and like you say, Taylor Harris looks more of that inside forward type of player. So we've maybe got the option to go to that as well if it's not working in game. So I think that's the thing with the squad. There is a lot of options and players who can play different roles and different positions. I mean, Jason Lowe is another one, has played centre half, has played centre mid. So I think we're quite well covered in that, despite having a small squad. It's not like, right, we've got a right wing back injured, who's going to play there? I think you've got a few different options on that, depending on the sort of questions of the game. And I think we've probably using the budget better than we have in previous years, where we've maybe ended up with like 28 players, of which 20 are pretty average to be polite. Whereas I think this year you've got a handful of players who are very, very good and probably in the top 10% in their position, which we haven't had for quite a while. So if you look at like Ironside, you would put him as one of the better forwards in the league. Patrick, definitely. I think Smallwood is definitely in that. And then Nathan Smith, Patrick Brough, and Luke McGee. So you've got a spine of the team there now, which I think other teams would like those players. And we know there's as usual, there's some big money being thrown around from the likes of Gillingham and MK Dons, but after that, I think we're looking pretty well stocked.
Just noticed we've just ticked over 7 o'clock, Matt, so the window slammed shut. But is it over?
Well, I've noticed also that Blackpool have tweeted to say that they're going to announce a signing at 8 o'clock. And I mean, look, Tranmere missed out on Rasmus Højlund. He's completed his move away from Manchester United, so it's not him. Still no announcement from Liverpool on Isak, so you never know. Maybe that's a deal that's in the offing. But it in all seriousness, it could be that they are waiting to put all the finishing touches on an assigning video or something similar, and that they haven't quite got that ready. Maybe the people who do social media are having their tea. Who knows? But hopefully something will be announced now at some point. It does baffle me, Rob, that teams leave it this late in the window. I mean, I guess it's just human nature that whatever the situation, lots of people like to leave things until the last minute, but you've got all summer to do something, and then suddenly on the deadline day you're scrambling around trying to get something completed. And I know it's often a domino effect. Once one move happens, another and another and another, and so on and so on and so on. But it does still baffle me, and that's not a thing at Tranmere. That's a thing at everyone.
It is. I mean, I think if you look even the deals that have been rumbling all window at right at the top end, the likes of Isak and Visser and Mark Gay, they're all still rumbling along, aren't they? And backs and forwards with that. It's very much it's the fascinating thing about the dynamic that a transfer window creates, isn't it? The kind of chess, the mind games that probably come into that, agents playing games, clubs trying to work out if they can get the best deal by, holding someone's feet to the fire on it a little bit. And it wouldn't surprise me at all if Ironside's been Crosby's main target the whole window, but they, for whatever reason, have been wanting to hold off, or we haven't been quite willing to pay that extra £50 a week that they've been asking for, etc. And it's, I'm still relatively confident, given the sources that have been coming out about Ironside, the fact that Doncaster Press are saying that they're not just hearing it's in the offing, but it's a permanent deal, and you've got Peter Rourke there as well. It wouldn't surprise me if the deal was done hours ago, and we are literally just putting together that big package because it's our big signing that we want to really get right and make a splash over. That's the optimist in me. And I've also just had Sky Sports notifications saying clubs now have 2 hours with the deal sheets to get any outstanding deals over the line. So I'm sure we're going to see a number of deals being announced and completed between now and say 9-10 o'clock. Just kind of hoping that we're one of them. And you never know, maybe we get a random extra one through the door. I think, given how late we're getting in the piece now, I think if we're getting anything, we're getting one, and we're getting the, hopefully it's the Ironside deal. And I think if we do, we could grumble about 1 or 2 extra signings we'd like to have had, but I think that gives us a squad that is genuinely competitive at the top end of League Two. And I think the missing piece of the puzzle, and it also would be that whole piece of, I think you alluded to it there, Tom, but the idea of, a lot of managers talk about it having that spine of experience. You've got McGee, you'd have Smith, you'd have Smallwood, you'd have Patrick as kind of the player who can play across that piece, and then you'd have your Ironside. And I think that's the bit that's missing, isn't it? We haven't got that experienced leader up top. And the difference I think sometimes we see is when we bring Connor Jennings on in that position, he actually does do a bit of that job for us. Matt, you talked in the pod last week about how he did more when he came on really than Davidson had been able to do that whole match. And we also had the Crawley manager last week talking about how he came on and he won everything in the air. So there's definitely a role for Connor to come on and do that, and experience really does tell. But I don't think he really is a central sole striker that you build a team around. It's never been his game, and you can play Connor up top in the two, as we were saying. You can play quite a few of these other players, but I think if we can get that kind of player over the line, it does transform our prospects. And deadline day is deadline. I've never been a massive fan of it, but I do see the kind of popcorn appeal of it. It does create this kind of artificial jeopardy for all clubs that keeps us hooked, even though we find it quite a challenge.
Yeah, I think the type of deal, the fact that it's going to be a permanent one as well, I don't think there's any chance we're paying Ironside the wage he's on at Doncaster. I think there will be some kind of agreement between Doncaster and Joe on a payoff, and then we'll pay what we can pay, so that it's probably complicated the deal a bit in that. And from Doncaster's end, they've probably been waiting as late as they can to see if anyone else comes forward, and thankfully on this occasion, hopefully no one has, and done the usual Tranmere thing of a player being on his way and suddenly driving down to Salford or somewhere. But I think the other important thing is the numbers at that end of the pitch. With how Crosby wants to play, generally it's a very aggressive, high tempo game now, and the press. And if you're playing Tuesday, Saturday, which we're going to see very soon, you're not going to do that with the same front three. And that's something Crosby's done since he's come into the club, hasn't he? We've seen a lot of subs used in games to keep them energy levels up through 90 minutes. So that's where I think if you're bringing Connor Jennings and Davison on for the last half hour when you're a goal up, and they can run themselves into the ground, get hold of the ball and be a nuisance, that's where they will still have a role, I'm sure. But yeah, I think in terms of Joe, I think it is one of them that's probably gone to the very last minute on probably Doncaster's end. Obviously, then it's tying the paperwork together, and I'm sure there's probably more high profile signings that are being dealt with than ours at the FA headquarters or wherever the paperwork goes these days. Unless Joe Ironside's ahead of Alexander Isak in the pecking order, which hopefully he is. But yeah, I think it's a little unusual that there's nothing from the club, even if it's just a little teaser or something. You thought they might have put that out. Whether they're trying to play with the fan base and get everyone to absolutely lose their heads and create a massive fume on X and social media, I don't know, before proving the point. But yeah, it's obviously as every minute goes by, you get a little bit more edgy. But hopefully we've not been done, and I'm sure from the player's side as well, he knows he isn't going to be a first choice, or probably anywhere near the frame at Doncaster. So it's not like he's going to want to be staying there. He's going to be actively trying to push for a move, I'm sure. So yeah, we're probably as calm as you could be in a Tranmere Rovers deadline day situation.
It's the old classic, isn't it? I'm just seeing this message from Rich here, who says nothing more Tranmere than to sign right inside from Skem. Like typical Tranmere would say they've made a big name signing, and the big name signing would be Konstantopoulos, or the former Hartlepool goalkeeper or something, just because he's got so many letters in his name. We're 10 minutes post the window closing now, so there is reason for people to be getting nervous, tetchy, irritated over the lack of news regarding a signing. I think it's not hyperbole to say that Tranmere's window is made or broken on their ability to bring in a striker today. If they don't bring in a striker today, is the squad stronger than it was last year? It's deeper. It's definitely deeper. There's more options. It is a significantly stronger defensive unit than it was at this time 12 months ago, I would say. And it's just got a better manager. It's a more organised side. It is a side that you are confident going into games with, and you don't go to an away ground thinking that they're going to lose 3-0 before a ball's even been kicked. That said, it's also a side that, as we saw on Saturday, could quite easily lose by the odd goal, or as we've seen against Gillingham and Colchester, get stung by a late goal and therefore drop points in matches that we think they're capable of winning, because they don't have, to our knowledge, at this point in time, the best central attacking options. Rob talked about moving Amari Patrick further forward before. For me, that would be an absolute no-go, because I think you're restricting the creative freedom that he offers elsewhere on the pitch. I'd take him off corners, though. And you've got Davison or Jennings or Taylor and Harris. That, for me, is not enough. So today is made or broken by whether they do get that signing through the door, Tom.
Yeah, and I think the other interesting thing so far this year in the league, like, we've always got the first goal in games, haven't we, so far, and gone that goal up, which we know, particularly at League Two, you get the first goal, the chances are you go on to get a result, don't you? And we had that obviously famous or infamous stat from a while back of not coming back from a goal down to win a game in, was about 55 years or something. And that's where you need those attacking options, because if we play, like, if you played a Gillingham or I'm trying to think of a team, like, say, if Harrogate came to Prenton Park and got the first goal and then they just camped in, have we then got the options to unlock that? I think there's a couple of players who you would want on the pitch in that situation, but then there's others, like if they were camped back and we were just lumping it into the box like we tended to do when we're chasing a game. Could you see Josh Davison getting that goal? No. Could you see Connor? Possibly. Could you see Taylor and Harris? Unlikely. Could you see Amari from 30 yards? Probably the most likely option, but not one that you can rely on week after week after week, despite what he did last year. So I think there's got to be them options. There's got to be that more goals throughout the team, because this was something I was talking about with someone the other day, is if you look at the sort of starting 11 on Saturday, it's very much 3 centre-backs, 2 wing-backs who are defenders. It's not like when Amari plays and you've got a winger there. You've then got 2 holding midfielders, and you look at all of them and you think there's not many goals there, and there's not much that's going to help create a goal there either. So it's then, I'd say, a lot of pressure on Whittaker and Patrick, and we obviously had Josh Davison leading the line on Saturday as well, and we know he's not the biggest goal threat out there. So all of a sudden you're looking to Patrick and Whittaker to be 2 players out of a team of 11, right, lads, you go and find us a goal, or find us 2 or 3 to win us a game. And there's got to be more emphasis on that. I think the centre halves probably are a more of a threat off set pieces this year. Bruff's obviously a big lad. Smith's very aggressive and obviously has got one already off a corner, but I think there's got to be a bit more creativity through the team, a few more options. Certainly if we go a goal down and we say, right, how are we going to go and get 2 goals? I don't think you would get that with the starting 11 we had on Saturday. So yeah, I think that's where other options. I mean, I would say I like what I saw of the boy from Leicester, is it Jaden Joseph? I thought he looked for his debut, quite confident getting on the ball, took a shot on, quite nippy. So he could be potentially a really good attacking option if we're chasing a game. So hopefully that's a sign that works out. But again, it's a young lad with very little experience of league football, and that's, if you take someone like a Rob Apter, Rob had gone on loan to a number of different clubs before he came to us, so he had that real world football experience. Some of these boys, I don't think have had that. I will counter that by I like some of them. What I've seen of Billy Black, I think he's a big lad and he looks a nice, tidy player. Harris has got good pedigree and has nice touches, but adapting to League Two and then adapting to the pressure of playing for Tranmere, which is a thing. You speak to plenty of players, and we're not the easiest club to play for, I'm sure. And that's where you would like to see just a little bit of help for those guys as well.
It's funny as well, isn't it? I think that I'm not sure if this is the same at every club because it's such a key role, but it does feel like we quite often are a bit cursed with the striker position. It's either scrambling around to find that one who can make a difference, or we get that one through the door and then they suffer a horrendous injury that scuppers us, or they get recalled from loan. And we've had every variation of this over the years. I was just looking at how Luke Norris has done, because I really rated Luke Norris when we saw in flashes what he was capable of, and it just couldn't get it to work for him on the pitch, could it? Those injuries just completely scuppered him, really. But he has scored 4 goals in his first 5 games for Bournemouth this season, and I really hope he's able to have a good season and recovers a bit of the twilight of his career there. But it just couldn't get it to work for us. And likewise, Harvey Saunders on his debut for Eastleigh gets a goal and an assist in 5 minutes, including a header, a striker's header that I've never seen him deliver before. So, we kind of have to overcome that. So if we can get that Ironside through the door, or if we can build Josh Davis into a striker, maybe that's the thing that makes the difference. But yeah, since James Norwood, we haven't, or Andy Cook, we haven't really had that. Over several seasons, a striker who really, you're just confident isn't going to have a terrible injury or isn't going to have a terrible run of form. And let's hope this window we find a crack in.
Right, the Doncaster Free Press are reporting that Joe Ironside has joined Tranmere on a permanent deal, and that a signing or an announcement will be made soon. Let's hope it is soon, because I think all of us want to go and have some tea and watch whatever on telly. There's some US Open tennis to catch up on, I'm sure, at some point. Let's assume that this is a deal that is going to go through. How big a signing would Joe Ironside be for Tranmere? Someone who I've certainly seen have very good games against Tranmere in the past, who's scored goals at a higher level, had a good season in League One with Cambridge in 2021-22, scored 14 in 38, scored 14 in 44 in League Two the year before as they were promoted, 20 in 45 in League Two in 23-24 for Doncaster. I mean, he's a good player, isn't he, who gets a lot of goals, or can get a lot of goals. Last season, 4 in 39. But I believe there was quite a lot of substitute appearances in that, and it wasn't his most fluent year. Very well liked at Doncaster, very highly thought of by their fan base. If he comes in, is that the moment we start talking about Tranmere as being a top 7 contender, Tom?
I think so. With the players you've signed, like you've not signed Richie Smallwood and Nathan Smith to come 15th, have you? You're signing players there to try and push and do something. I think Crosby's alluded the same, hasn't he? That he's an ambitious manager and he's wanting us to challenge at that top end. And this season, it isn't the most scary League Two. I do think there's some decent teams and a lot of teams very similar to each other this year. So I think the playoffs, I think it'll be a bit of a bun fight for those last couple of spots this year. But I think with Joe as well, the other thing we've got to probably bear in mind as a fan base when he comes in is he's probably not played much football at all. the last few weeks or more month. So it might take him a few games to get up to speed, and we might have to. I think Crosby he's not an idiot. He'll be aware, and we might have to manage him through a couple of games. I'd be surprised if he came in and he was doing 90 minutes every Tuesday, Saturday. But I think it's clear his goal scoring record is very, very strong. Like you say, last season, I think there was a lot of like 10, 15 minutes off the benches and things, which it sort of makes your goal scoring to game numbers not look so good, does it? But I think he's a big improvement on what we've got. Again, if you get Christian Dennis back fit as well, and you have the two of them playing together, that could be quite a good combo. Certainly, if you're chasing a game. So, yeah, I think it is, and hopefully, we then see other players step up and show us a bit more of what they're about in the sort of midfield and final third. And we could make a good fist of it. Because like we know with League Two, the teams who are spending the big money, your MKs and your Gillinghams, like they're not guaranteed to be in that top 3 or top 7. It can often go wrong because you've ended up with these players on huge wages, and they've come for the huge wage, and when it starts getting a bit rough and tumble, they don't like it. So I would expect us to be certainly in that top 10 challenging for playoffs now, if that signing is over the line. I think there's a lot of teams similar to each other. I think there's been some very good signings in League Two actually in the last week or two from teams. A few eye-opening ones. I've seen Salford made quite a good signing today up front, and they look like they're having a bit more of a go this year. Yeah, I think we've got a squad that should be capable of contending for it. Whether you get over the line, there's probably a lot of factors in that. Do we keep some of the players fit? Do we avoid the suspensions? I think, like most teams in this league, that is going to play a big part. But there's no doubt with a Joe Irons side, our chances are greatly increased, and if we haven't got him.
Yeah, I just having a look back at some of his stats there, Matt, as well. And, 23-24, I think he scored 24 goals in League Two, and the year before that, 15 goals in League One, and the year before that, similar in League Two. Those are kind of numbers that we're going to need a striker to be able to deliver for us, I think. And at 31, I don't think he's a bad age. Quite a lot of strikers, that's actually when they're kind of reaching kind of their prime, because they've got the know-how, the experience they've built up, and their legs haven't gone yet. It's particularly for having looked at some of the clips of the sort of goals he tends to score and the sort of presence he is. He very much seems to be someone who comes alive in that 6-yard box, who gets himself in there, wins headers. I think that's one of the criticisms we may have seen of Davison, is not all sure he's as confident when he's actually going for the ball in the air as someone with his kind of size and presence maybe should be. I think you won't see those kind of issues with Ironside. And football's such a confidence game that I think, if we've got a presence up there, someone that we're confident can deliver for us, I think it brings an extra 5-10% out of everybody in the team, doesn't it? It just gives you that bit of a swagger. And I think we've got, especially the younger players that we've brought in, having something like that in front of them, someone to play off, someone who can link play and bring the likes of Whittaker and Patrick, and even if we're bringing in Sol, Harris, they can come off the bench and maybe impact and know that they can create something there. But I think I'd be surprised if we're not challenging, or I think we should be setting our expectations that we should be challenging for the playoffs if we can get that signing over the line. And I think the recruitment, couldn't really, given our challenges, given the fact that takeover hasn't happened, we're still in limbo with that. The atmosphere Crosby's created and the positivity he's created, it really is something that he should take a lot of credit for, because I think it's a very tricky situation to foster that in this environment. So if we backed him enough to bring in that striker that he thinks can make the difference, then I can't see why we shouldn't challenge. And I think we've got the players and the kind of captain types right through the team who can keep us on course for that. But like I say, it's all coming down to the to the deal sheets as the sun goes down, isn't it? And Tranmere wouldn't have it any other way.
Well, no, they wouldn't. And the tweet that the message I just had on the screen there from Ant Hale is absolutely accurate. Sign off, guys. They'll announce it once you're offline. It does appear to be the case that once we have recorded a news show in the week, it just goes out of date within about 10 minutes because they've signed a new player or someone's left. It happened earlier this season where we were talking about that the desperation to sign someone, and about 20 minutes after we'd finished recording at about 8 o'clock at night, by the way, they announced the signing at 9 o'clock. Great message here from Dave Stone, who I saw on Saturday going a shade of red that I've never seen before, Dave, as he launched some expletives at the referee. Top filling here, lads, he says. Are we at the point of Tranmere players with metal names? Kenny Irons, Jim Steele, Steve Cooper, and a lot of credit goes to Guitar Techniques, who has mentioned Andy Manganese as well, which for a long time when I typed Mangan into my phone, it did auto-correct it to Manganese. Richard Freightman got in touch with a message as well. He says, why is Ironside leaving Doncaster? And I think it boils down to two things. He's only made 2 appearances in the League Cup this season, and both of them come off the bench. From what I can tell, I think they play with a sole lone striker or a kind of a player playing off the striker, and the players they've got are decent. Billy Sharp is a very good striker at this level. They've got Joe Ironside, as we know. Brandon Hanlon is a very decent player. And they've also brought in a player from the MLS this week. Toyosi Olasanya has arrived on loan from Houston Dynamo until January. So that means Ironside's even further down Grant McCann's pecking order there, and perhaps makes it more clear to Joe Ironside that he needs to move on and leave the club. Ricky Charlesworth is a journalist for the Doncaster Free Press. He's their Doncaster Rovers reporter. He says no hitches on the Ironside deal. Announcement imminent. Clubs are just finalising the admin/media side of things. We'll probably give this another 5 or so minutes and then wrap it up, because we could be bleating on all night. And as Ant correctly says, whatever time we finish, a new signing will be announced within minutes anyway. And we will be able to react to it on the news show this week as well. Because the news show will be out on Thursday with all your transfer deadline day roundup. Rich Davis is referring to Alan Irwin here and something that he once had stuck in his ear when he was outside Finch Farm. I know Al very personally, and the smile that gets on his face when you mention that is very much a wry one. But basically that particular incident is the reason why they don't do things outside of training grounds anymore, because fans used to come and make a mockery of the whole situation, and quite rightly some of the journalists didn't feel like they were in a particularly safe place. I'm waiting for some people to mention some more Tranmere players who have got metal names, and I'm sure some will come through. Rob has turned his microphone on, which means he's got something to say.
I was just going to venture Steve Copper, which is not quite there, but it's close. Cooper?
Yeah, it's close enough. Yeah, we'll give you that one. I'm going to have to scour the complete record and find a few more names. Tom, I think you've got a little snippet of info as well, the potential.
Yeah, I mean, someone just messaged me, and I think it's probably an obvious one that we're looking at a goalkeeper coming in, which I think obviously we've got the Pizza Cup, Motor Cup, whatever they're deciding to call the cup this year, games. So you would think a young goalkeeper that we can guarantee game time in that would make sense. That's probably quite an easy one to get over the line quite late, you would imagine, probably a loan, and I think the parent club would not want a significant amount of wages for that. So yeah, someone seems to think that might be happening, which I think makes sense. Obviously, still nothing on Big Joe. We know that'll be within a minute of us leaving. They'll be waiting to press the button. So, yeah, good old Tranmere with that. I do hope we play on the Doncaster thing when we announce it, and maybe Joe Ironside storms into Palios's house and shouts Donny at him and gets chased down the driveway by Nicola with a handbag or something. But yeah, it's. I think the window, like I think everyone gets very excited, don't they, by the final day. If you look at it from start to finish, I think we've moved out some players that we needed to. We've brought in some good exciting ones. I think it's a real positive step. We seem for once to be using the budget in a bit more of a carefully planned way, getting more quality in. So I think a lot of credit to Crosby, Parky, and I think Ollie Knight. Crosby keeps mentioning. So those three are obviously heading up that area. I know they've got a lot of stick in previous years, and maybe justifiably so. But I'm sure we're not the easiest club to identify players for and get them over the line as well. So in this case, I think they've done a really good job this summer.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I bet the club, it'd be just like the club to do a whole kind of build-up announcement, and it's the young goalkeeper, wouldn't it, before we hear anything else? Don't go to sleep yet, Rovers fans.
There's a striker in the building. Do either of you remember what Leeds did a few years ago? Where Leeds basically tweeted it about 15 minutes ago until the deadline or whatever it was. Don't go to bed just yet. We've got some more for you. And then at about 5 minutes after the window shut, having got their fans in a real fluster, they tweeted saying, "That's us done for today." So at least Tranmere haven't done anything like that on their social medias today, where they've hyped you up and then let you down.
Yeah, maybe it was a different club. I remember there being one saying, "Don't go to bed yet. Still business to be done," and it was a loan out deal that came about 2 hours after the window. But yeah, it's keeping us down to the wire. Like you say, as soon as we're off air, something will happen. Be it the young goalkeeper or the thing we're all waiting for. But
let's be honest, they ain't going to announce anything at 7:32 because these things tend to be announced kind of on the hour or thereabouts, don't they? So we will wrap it up for there because I'm sure people have got better things to do with their evening than watch us fill for a signing that maybe they won't even announce. I miss the old Ronnie Moore days or the Les Parry days when you'd rock up at a ground and the players had come out to warm up at 2:15 and you'd be looking at two of them and thinking, who on earth's that? And it'd be some random loanee that they brought in from some under 21 team who you'd never heard of unless you were an absolute Football Manager geek, and then that person turned out to be in the starting line. It was Ben Gibson they picked up, wasn't it, on the way to a game at a service station once, and numerous others. They just didn't announce the signings, did they, to try and keep a lid on it? Sadly, those days are long gone. Anyway, my thanks to Tom and to Rob for joining us. My thanks to all of you for listening and watching over the last hour as well. As I say, let's all expect the signing at 8 o'clock, maybe even at 2:45. I'm assuming that is how this is going to work. But we will have loads and loads of reaction on the news show this week, whether or not there is a signing, because if there isn't, I think we can all agree it's been a disappointing deadline day. If there has, then maybe it'll be the signing that pushes Tranmere towards potential promotion or playoff finish this season. So thank you for your time. We will be back tomorrow morning, actually, with a 5 games interview. If you subscribe at atriptothemoonpod.co.uk, you can listen to Spotify or through Patreon. It costs you just £3 a month to join, and for that you get your 3 weekly shows. And we've got a 5 games interview with Tranmere fan and shirt collector Chris Watson tomorrow, who has every single Tranmere shirt since 1989. Some good ones and some very bad ones in there. We discuss that, and he picks his favourite 5 Tranmere matches as well. So thank you very much for your company. We look forward to the new signing being announced imminently, and we will speak to you in the week.